Mark Twain said, "There are only 2 days that really matter in someone's life. The day that they were born and the day they figure out why."
For the last 15 years of my life, I've wanted to set up a company. Like 15 years is a long time.
Right after high school, I was a chef and I opened a restaurant that promptly failed.
I was at McKinsey for 4.5 years. Along the way, I realized that it didn't motivate me to get up, be excited about going to work.
I decided to go back to college. I fell in love with biochemistry, biology, and went on to initially become an academic.
The stars didn't align until just 2 years ago. And when they did, it was a great moment of my life because I could finally quit my job.
When I first left my very comfortable job, I gave myself 6 months to start to have a salary.
I didn't have any money in the company to pay a salary. I didn't have any investors that could support me.
I was on food stamps for a little while. I went without a paycheck for 2 years.
It was a cliff that I jumped off.
Entrepreneurs are asked to walk on water, but they actually have to walk through walls.
You need the right people, you need the right idea, it needs to be the right time.
The hardest part is actually money.
It's all chicken and an egg. If I have money, I can get the team. If I have the team, I can get money. What do I get first?
How do you pay for everything? How do you do the studies that the Food and Drug Administration require you to do, and at the end of the day, make money for investors? If you want to be an entrepreneur, find someone who's done it before.
It's important to talk to other people and run your idea by other people because everybody's perspective is going to help you build a better concept.
Align yourself with people who have been successful entrepreneurs. This is an apprenticeship. There's a lot of opportunity for people who want to change the world.
We said to ourselves, some idiot is going to do this and make a lot of money off of it, and we could be those idiots.
I could speak to you for 20 minutes on how fun it is to quit your job.
You can be a great surfer and you can go out on a small day and you're not going to get a great ride. But if you go out at the right time and you pick the right wave, then there's an opportunity to do great things. We started our company literally in a garage, and JLABS has been a huge accelerator for us, both in terms of access to equipment as well as people and other resources.
They had all of that infrastructure in place, so we could just focus on the science. And as an entrepreneur, that's your job. Your job is take the science and turn it into products as fast as you possibly can. And in that sense, JLABS is providing a great benefit to the ecosystem around the world.
It takes a village to raise a company, and I view the team in the most abstract senses. Johnson & Johnson Innovation Center and JLABS, we've had a lot of interactions with many of those folks there, and all of them been amazingly positive and really helping us navigate to where we need to go and where we're going.
There does appear to be really nice cross-communication between all of these different organizations within this mother Johnson & Johnson. I've been pretty impressed by that.
2 years ago, we began operations at Janssen Labs, now JLABS, and we're very glad that we did, because while there, we were able to accelerate our innovation. It was there at JLABS that we discovered our delivery technology. And the reason we were able to do so is we had all the right equipment, we had a small team, but the right people, and we were in the right place to help execute on these great ideas.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage Kara Bortone of JLABS.
So, I wasn't supposed to be here today. That's right, I wasn't supposed to be here in the capacity that I am today. The reason is, you see, I come from a long line of scientists. My grandfather was an engineer, my father a marine biologist, my brother a neuroscientist, so it's expected that I also become a scientist. And this was really the only way my family thought I could contribute to society. It was fine, and I was even encouraged to have an interest in art and architecture, but as long as I kept science at the forefront of my career, that was most critical. And I had to be published in Nature, Science, and Cell, of course. My existence was defined by a hypothesis, planned through experiments, and calculated by my results. And I was well on my way to reaching that goal. I had a PhD from the University of Texas and landed a high-profile postdoc position at the Scripps Research Institute in La Jolla. Our group at Scripps was focused on elucidating the structures of ABC transporters. These are the proteins responsible for multi-drug resistance in bacteria and also cancer cells resistance to chemotherapeutics. Yes, this was big, and we had the cover of Science to prove it. Only problem was this research was expensive. We had to use specialized detergents that cost tens of thousands of dollars per month. So one day my postdoc advisor told me that there was a big fundraising event that evening at Scripps, and he wanted me to attend. To my surprise, I arrive at a really lavish gala with chairs wrapped in white linens and lavish food spread out on tables, and an orchestra playing Blue Moon in the distance. So this was a real shock to me in my meager postdoc existence, of course. But luckily, I've never been afraid to talk to strangers, so I grabbed a plate of ahi tuna and a glass of champagne and started to mingle with the philanthropist there. To my surprise, it didn't take me long to engage with a group of people, and I was telling them about the work we were doing in our laboratory. And many of them had had friends and family that were affected by resistance to chemotherapeutics. They were really interested in the work we were doing, and one impeccably dressed woman came up to me and said, could she help support our lab for a few months, and proceeded to hand me a check with 6 figures on it. Needless to say, this opened my eyes to a whole new world. A world of expensive equipment and materials that suddenly became possible through my benefactors' investment dollars. I tell this story because it was my first experience in presenting to investors, and I was instantly hooked. I realized that my real passion wasn't in bench work, it was in telling people about the amazing discoveries we were making. And I don't have to tell you that this progress comes at a cost, and finding investors to support research is one of the greatest challenges in our industry. Fast forward 10 years, and I find myself a part of the very first JLABS. That's Johnson & Johnson's Innovations Incubator for emerging life science companies. After starting in San Diego in 2012, we opened incubators in Boston and the Bay Area, and just this year, started facilities in the emerging life science hubs of Houston, Texas, and Toronto, Canada. I have to say, I really have one of the coolest jobs in the world. Every day I meet new healthcare companies that are working on the biggest challenges that face our society: Alzheimer's, diabetes, lung cancer, to name a few. And being a part of Johnson & Johnson Innovation, we're able to provide a number of solutions to these companies, everything from research collaborations to equity to space in our incubators. And my role is to learn about the company's science and help them access resources to move their research forward into transformational new products for patients. One thing that being involved with emerging companies has made me passionate about is ecosystems. How do we build ecosystems that stimulate collaboration, and how do we cultivate new ideas that can be commercialized and reach the patients that really need them? We all know the adage, it takes a village. In fact, Caleb mentioned that in his video as well. Well, that applies to raising viable companies and products just as much as it applies to raising children. Sadly, there are so many great discoveries made every day that never reach patients due to a lack of resources. Strong ecosystems can help ensure companies have the resources they need to forge ahead. So what are the components to building a great ecosystem? First and foremost, life science ecosystems exist because of innovation. To have a strong ecosystem, you need to have great companies that are based on great ideas that are usually rooted in strong academic research. But having a great idea isn't the only factor that's important. The idea must address a problem that's relevant to the industry and be developed in a timeline that means it'll be commercially practical. In other words, the timing has to be right. If it's too early, the basic research hasn't caught up, and there isn't a data package around the molecular target to build investor confidence in the approach, too late, and the product won't be commercially viable by the time it reaches the market, which means the investors won't make a return. One of the things we do at Johnson & Johnson Innovation is apply our commercial insight to help give guidance to the commercial viability of a company's product. Secondly, human capital is critical. It's instrumental to have leaders that know what it takes to traverse the rocky terrain of research and development, jump through the regulatory hurdles, and run the marathon of adequately funding a biotech company for the many years it takes to get to market. There's no doubt that having brilliant scientific minds behind a company is critical, but those brilliant inventors aren't always as brilliant at business. You need someone that will keep eminent scientific minds focused on the practical aspects of what needs to be achieved. To fill that gap, Johnson & Johnson Innovation provides companies with mentorship and connections to C-level executives that can help companies maneuver the regulatory and funding landscape as well as grow to scale. Next, you need to have experienced people to do, that's what we jokingly like to say in the industry, the real work of the day-to-day research of collecting data, analyzing results, and pushing programs forward. What does it mean to have a great team? In my mind, it's not about having a degree from Harvard or about being on your 10th startup, although all those things are really great. It's about resilience and being able to pivot in the face of adversity. I'd like to tell you about two entrepreneurs, Joe and Pad. When I first met Joe and Pad, they had leadership positions at the 100-year-old Japanese company Nido Denko and had just moved a liver fibrosis program into clinical development. They believed the future of medicine was in nanoparticle delivery and wanted to take the plunge in starting their own startup. They had just quit the relative security of Nido Denko, licensed their space at JLABS, and secured investment dollars. The only step left to starting their company was to push the button on licensing the intellectual property they had negotiated. Only problem was that on the eve of starting the company, they learned the IP they had negotiated was no longer available. It was gone, just like that. Did Joe and Pad go running back to their well-paying jobs begging for a second chance? No. They locked themselves in a garage for a whole weekend and came up with a plan that enabled them to deliver nucleotides in a way that was even more efficient than the approach they were going to in-license. Now that's resilience. The approach showed so much promise that their company, Arcturus Therapeutics, signed a strategic collaboration with J&J Innovation last year. This brings us to what might be the most critical component of building successful ecosystems, the investment piece. Without funding that spans the entire continuum of seeding, growing, and scaling companies, the products will never see the light of day. A successful ecosystem must have or attract savvy angel and seed investors, as well as venture capitalists. Realizing not every company is as fortunate as Boston and the Bay Area, there are things emerging ecosystems can do to educate private investors so that they can become more comfortable in the biotech arena. I understand, for example, that you have some of the top life science investors here, right here in Arizona. Biotech regions can run investor speed dates, which match the private investors to fledgling biotech companies. The governments can give tax incentives for local biotech investments. And lastly, they can engage with biotech venture capitalists from other areas. While many of these investors are based on the East and West Coast, some firms, like the Mercury Fund, which is based in Houston, prioritizes their investments outside the Tier 1 biotech hubs. In my mind, this is of the utmost importance, as there is a wealth of truly great ideas in regions like the Rocky Mountain Southwest that might never be brought to patients if we didn't have investment dollars from VC firms. How do we fund companies so that they can translate innovative ideas into new solutions for patients? One thing is we can take a lesson from the playbook of IT companies. In the IT world, you give a couple guys or a couple gals a couple $100K, a few years, and they can turn a new idea into the next internet sensation with $1 billion market cap. How can we make it just as easy to start a healthcare company as a tech company? Incubation provides a way for companies to gain access to specialized infrastructure and core equipment without a lot of upfront capital. With this infrastructure, they can deliver proof of concept data or get to that next value inflection point that piques the interest of investors. Incubators also create a community where cross-pollination of ideas take place. At JLABS, companies collaborate on anything from borrowing a cup of buffer to signing research collaborations with each other to actually forming new spin-out companies. It is the number of collisions between companies and the density of collisions that's important to innovation. It's the interface of multidisciplinary teams where new ideas are developed and optimized. We can do a lot to stimulate these interactions. For example, at JLABS, we hold a number of CEO roundtables, safety meetings, happy hours, and mixers where scientists and executives can connect. As a result, we have 4 sets of companies out of 40. That's 1/5 of the companies that have signed formal collaborations with each other. Without the infrastructure for these companies to collide, perhaps they would have never worked together. Collaboration doesn't just take place between the incubator companies. Johnson & Johnson houses the companies in our incubators in a no-strings-attached way, meaning we don't take equity or first right of refusal. But we do engage early and often with the companies, and this enables us to mentor them, shape the science, and collaborate in ways we never thought possible when they first joined JLABS. I'd like to tell you one more story of a company that illustrates these points. In the spring of 2014, Kartik Ramurthy was an unassuming grad student with the aspiration to advance drug discovery, just that. He was handpicked to be a part of the inaugural class of the Illumina Accelerator, and with 2 to 3 sequencers working 24 hours a day, Kartik and his small team were able to produce terabytes of data. In doing so, they harnessed the power of the human non-coding genome to create novel therapeutic targets. Then they needed to do more studies to validate the approach, so they moved into JLABS, and through funding from a basic research collaboration with J&J, they generated the data they needed to raise their first venture money. I tell this example because encoded genomics success was made possible through the accelerator and incubator environment. In other words, incubator environments can help to reduce the chicken and egg problem of needing the funding to get the data, but needing the data to get the funding. In addition to providing the physical infrastructure to move research forward, J&J has designed a series of seminars where J&J employees give sessions on topics ranging from how to file an investigational new drug, to business development basics for life science companies, to regulatory affairs workshops. This commercialization curriculum creates a roadmap for advancing new discoveries from the bench to the bedside. Additionally, we run Meet With sessions where we bring in funders from governmental and not-for-profit organizations like the National Cancer Institute, the Gates Foundation, and the Wellcome Trust. In addition to the 4 main components we discussed here today, basic research, great teams, investment, and facilities, there are other contributions that help build healthy life science ecosystems. Strong organizations like AZBio and the entire Rocky Mountain Southwest region energize and unite biotech communities and lobby local governments for subsidies, tax breaks, and matching funds to help support growing biotech ecosystems. With its roadmap for building biotech hub in hand, AZBio has been advocating for the local biotech community since 2002. Events like the White Hat Investors meeting here today help to build the collegial spirit that's so important to creating a thriving biotech environment and grow into a top-tier biotech region. You know, looking back, maybe I was supposed to be here. And I believe all of you were supposed to be here too, giving your lives to something big, whether it's to growing better crops, inventing smarter devices, or delivering new life-saving therapeutics. You're all making the world a better place. To quote Dr. Paul Janssen, the patients are waiting. So let's build strong ecosystems that can support the development of products and have a profound impact on people's lives. Thank you.